34 years. What was your position?
Well, I started out, I was the first law enforcement officer on the Gila National Forest, full-time. And then I went to, transferred to Oregon, the Rogue River National Forest, and I was the first full-time sworn law enforcement officer, uniform law enforcement officer in that region, which was Washington and Oregon. And I stayed there 4.5 years, and then I transferred to Santa Fe with the Bureau of Land Management, which is the Department of Interior. And then not too long after that, I transferred over to Customs here.
And what year was that?
1987.
So let me stop you there. First of all, the Pacific Northwest is a world away from growing up in near Lubbock.
Right.
Right? That's totally a different thing. 1987, is that the first time that you come to this region? Take me through your stage of your career.
Yes, in January of 1987, I transferred from the Department of Interior to the Department of Treasury, which was Customs. And they stationed me eventually, took most of the year, but eventually they transferred me to Deming, and I've been there ever since.
What is this area where we are right now? We're not, we're broadcasting and people are hearing the show generated out of El Paso, Texas, but we are west of there. We're in Deming, New Mexico. What is this area like? Kind of, if somebody's never been here.
Well, it's a farming, ranching community. Deming is the largest town in Luna County. Actually, it's the only real town. Columbus is a village. It's really remote for the most part. It's got the fence for the border, and but there's a lot of farming too in areas, and cotton, chili, different things like that. And so parts of it is fairly well populated, and some of it is absolutely none.
Desolate.
Desolate,
yeah.
Yes.
Yet, you guys, and in your career alongside Border Patrol and different raids, there's a lot of bad stuff that's gone on in this kind of Tri-County area. Talk about that.
Well, actually, here in Deming, or this Deming office, which included Lordsburg, Silver City, Deming, we had the largest drug and money laundering case probably in the history of New Mexico. And I think that will probably take in also El Paso and maybe southern Arizona. I'm not sure, I've never researched it that close, but
it was a big one.
Yeah, it was big. And $30–40 million worth of assets and farms and ranches and cars and people, and we probably convicted 70, 75, and these were major convictions. They weren't misdemeanors. It wasn't like a
felonies.
Street by. Yeah, they were felonies. Oh yeah.
When you look at your career that started in '87, basically in this area, fast forward to today, is it dramatically better? Is it about the same? Is it worse?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not in touch with the working guys as much as I used to be.
Sure.
And so it's kind of hard to say, but I don't see a lot of difference either way. The thing that bothers me the most is the big thing when I was still working was marijuana smuggling and cocaine smuggling. A little bit of heroin and methamphetamine was starting to show up. Well, now then they've got all this other stuff that's much more dangerous.
You've heard of fentanyl, I'm sure.
Fentanyl and the opioids that come with it.
Did you see? Was there a point? You don't have to give me a specific date or even a month or year, but it just seems like over the last decade or so, especially, you start to see this sad epidemic in this country, primarily run by the Sinaloa cartel and El Chapo, with the opioid addiction and the fentanyl.
Yes, I've seen that the dangerous aspect from that point, but there's also what I've seen is the lack of respect is declining, or the respect for law enforcement and authority keeps going down, 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 and it makes the job much more difficult to do. I can think of times when there were people would contact me with information, and they weren't working off of beef, or they were concerned, and I don't think we're getting that anymore, or not as much.
Would you please mark this moment? However, we're going to tell Leroy.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a sense, Gayle, that no matter the administration, perhaps, or you tell me if it's different, is there a sense that, you know, on the ground with men and women like you, that, boy, as far away as DC is, it's like there's just not the connecting of the dots, that they're just not.
No, I've seen the change in my lifetime in the political aspects, dramatic changes. And I go back and I remember conversations I had with my father and people like that. They felt like we had changed dramatically. The discipline has gone down. Discipline in schools, discipline at home, discipline on the streets. It's declined dramatically.
That's got to be frustrating for you.
Oh, it is, and it's scary to me, because you know, I'm at the end of my lifetime. It's not going to bother me much longer, but what about the kids that are coming up that have no concept of what it was when I was a kid? When I was in high school, I never heard of anybody getting shot in school, anywhere around the school. I never heard of it. And if you want to carry a gun on the back window of your pickup or in your car, nobody cared. But everybody knew if you do something wrong, there was a penalty to pay. And that you learned that as a child. And so you didn't have these kind of, and when a policeman told me to do something, I didn't question it. I did it, and we all did.
Yeah.
Because he had a job to do, and we knew we'd get in trouble.
Well, you were held accountable.
Exactly.
There was an action, and there was maybe a consequence.
Right, and that's kind of gone away, and it seems like it's declining all the time.
Yeah. Let me ask you about here specifically, as we're near Deming, New Mexico. Agriculture is here, and yet you've got the Columbus port of entry, and you had told me about pretty significant $40–50 million in seizures and property, and let's just call them what they are, and that's the bad guys.
Yeah.
Has it improved in the sense of illegal crossings because of, as Donald Trump would say, that beautiful border wall? Because as far as you can drive, 10 to 15 minutes, at least as close as you can get around the Columbus port of entry, there's a wall as far as you can see.
Yes, and like I say, it stopped overnight. It was instantly stopped. I have known people in Arizona that were working on the wall and had decent jobs. They were responsible people, and instantly they were out of work.
When it stopped.
When it stopped, it stopped. And
then what does that do? That, the border crossings may stop with a wall. When the wall construction stops, that increases.
Sure, that increases the crossings, I think it emboldens them, because they think there's no problem. I'm going to get in, and I'll have access to all of these privileges that the other people have. I don't have to pay for them because they're there already. And I think that is consistent Some of the people come over here to work, but there's some of them come over here to get something.
And some of them are just bad people.
And some people can't stay where they were because they'll kill them down there, or they'll put them in prison. Up here, they don't have to worry about it. And those are incentives that we have to stop. We have to end those incentives like that. It's going to destroy this country if we don't, because they're going to turn it into what they had down there.
Let me ask you about the pressures. I've heard so many stories in just the last couple of days about there's lack of staffing. It's at various levels. Now I'm hearing that in 2 states. I certainly hear it back in Colorado as well. But you know what, with lack of staffing and maybe a federal system that just isn't holding people accountable and looks the other way, that all adds up to pressure. And can you talk about the pressure that is under the myriad agencies that are really, they're men and women trying to do the right thing and follow the laws on the books?
Mm-hmm. Okay, when I came here in 1987, to the best of my memory, there was, I think, 24 Border Patrol agents stationed in Deming. And I believe it was 18 in Lordsburg. And they worked us hard because we took all of their seizures. We did all the prosecutions on their seizures and ours. And they kept us busy. Now then, there's hundreds. And that still doesn't seem to be enough.
Because what are those hundreds doing? A lot of administrative, it sounds like.
Lots of administrative. And I learned this before I retired. There was a group in Douglas, Arizona, that they had groups of people that they would send across the border. And they knew they were going to be apprehended. But they would have, other than Mexican people, that have foreign countries, Chinese, whatever. And so they'd call everybody in just to do the paperwork and process. Well, then the drugs and the other people would cross behind them.
It's like a game.
Yeah, it was. And then eventually, whoever was getting apprehended, it'd be their turn to get through uncontested. And it was just a rotational thing.
Let me ask you this. Gayle, does it surprise you that one of the people we've talked with down here, I'm still blown away in recapping it. This gentleman said that there was one illegal immigrant who had been arrested 37 times. What is your reaction to that, and does that surprise you?
No, was that a female?
I'm not quite sure the gender, but let me just tell you, 37 times, man, woman, alien, that is a lot of testing the system.
Yes, and I know there was a woman, and the reason I say this, in Douglas that had been, last I heard was 32, I think, times she had been arrested. But she was getting paid, I'm sure, every trip to be these gang groups that would.
Well, it had to be worth it for her to do.
Sure.
And with the lack of consequence on the other side, you're not stopping it. I want to go back to the pressure, because if you don't mind, you shared with me off air a story of someone who took his own life.
Oh, this is whenever we first created HSI, I suppose.
Homeland Security.
Yes, and they made and I didn't know the man personally, and I got a lot of this information from people from Arizona that knew him. But they had made him a special agent in charge of the Phoenix office, which before with Customs it had just been what they call a RAC office, a small office, part of Tucson.
And RAC being? Resident
Agent in Charge, which would be 10 or 12 people, usually.
And that was you?
Well, no, I was here then.
Right, but you had a similar position?
Yeah.
Right.
And apparently, they felt like, the guys that knew him felt like the pressure that had thrown on him instantly, that he didn't ask for necessarily. It caused him a lot of grief, and he was traveling down the interstate highway at a high rate of speed, and he pulled his pistol out and shot himself. You know, and of course they didn't broadcast the investigation out to us. I mean, they out of courtesy and respect, you know, which I agreed with. I think they should have left it, you know, alone. But those are some of the pressures. I know they created our office. We became ICE and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Well, they were dealing with immigration people. We had never done that. We were working drugs, exports of munitions, money laundering, never immigration. And so all of a sudden we're having to learn this overnight. And that is difficult to do. Immigration is a very complicated area.
Yeah. What do you think the future, Gayle, is of this area?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I know that one of the things that I have seen is like when I was the RAC here, I had two task forces actually, and I brought in Border Patrol, state police, counties, cities, and local, and they interacted and they started working together and things. They were supporting each other, and I think we're losing that pretty fast. And I think one of the things that has to be done, they have to go back to this interacting. I think they need to be doing some cross training, a week or two of Border Patrol over here and the other guys. They're back and forth, but they have to start respecting each other's authority and accepting the fact that they're not the biggest guy on the block. Everybody's the same.
Does that messaging start from the top down, meaning the White House?
It should, yes. And the secretaries, undersecretaries, yes, they should support something like that. Will they? I don't think they'll take the time. But then they have, well, like the Commissioner of Customs, or what used to be the Commissioner of Customs, and the head of the Border Patrol, they can make some of that happen. And I think they need to quit thinking about maybe their political futures and things like that, and start getting back to the field and doing these things.
As we wrap up with you, I just want to know, what's your reaction, whether we see the border wall as far as we can see to the east and the west, what is your message to someone who may listen to this, you know, tonight or 2 weeks from now or 2 years from now? What would the message be from you that if we don't kind of wake up, the possibilities certainly could get even worse?
Oh, I think it will. I don't think there's any way else. If we don't go back, if we don't step back, and like when we had 24 Border Patrolmen here and 18 in Lordsburg, we didn't have this exodus coming over. What is causing it? We didn't cause it. Well, we provided a place for them. But what was happening then that's not happening then that's happening now, you know, and that has to be addressed. And this saying, here, come on in, here's your paperwork, we'll see you, that has to stop. That has got to stop, and those people have to be recovered, sent back, and let them do it properly. Because that's what they were doing 25, 30 years ago. And we didn't have this problem. Another thing, of course, is the fentanyl, but there will always be some drug that's available that's worse than the last one. I can remember when I was a grown man before I ever met anybody that I had known had smoked marijuana. Now that's how prevalent it was back then. And I knew one.
Changed.
Yeah, and I knew one guy that had a heroin habit, and I didn't know it till I was well, you know, grown for sure. But that's how things have changed. And now marijuana got to be the. When I was in Oregon, they were developing marijuana plants that were like 10% THC, which was unheard of. Everybody was saying, oh, oh, oh. Now then, I was listening to a news report the other day, and there's some of it much higher than that. They wouldn't even look at the 10% or 15% anymore. Which
you ever
then
think
was,
in any part of your life, and we'll wrap up with this, you ever think in any part of your life that marijuana would be legal in the state we're sitting in right now, legal in California, in Oregon, in Colorado, of course, so many states? It's crazy.
I never dreamed that would happen 25 years ago. I never dreamed it would happen. When I was in Oregon, they had made a couple of attempts to legalize marijuana, and they just fell on their face. And now it's legal there, in Colorado and different places, New Mexico, of heaven's sakes. And they're going to pay a terrible price. We're all going to pay a terrible price for that, because they can say whatever they want to, and they can brag about the tax money it brings in, but they don't talk about what it costs, what the costs are.
Human cost.
Human cost. And anybody that says marijuana is not a gateway drug is a fool or a liar, because it is. It leads to other drugs. And pretty soon it's going to lead to fentanyl, and which is going to kill them. And well, is there more people died from fentanyl last year than from automobile accidents? I mean, you know, it's not making any sense, and there's no logic to it. I mean, there's pretense, and people that like to smoke it, they want to legalize it because they don't want to get in trouble. Sure, and I think that's what's happened in a lot of these places, a lot of these states. They legalize it not to get the tax money, not to get the benefit of any expenditures. Is to get the smoke dope and not go to problem, get to jail.
Thank you for your career to this country. You're a public servant. I appreciate that.
Well, I was here a long time, and I appreciate every day of it. I worked for 4 different agencies in my career, and I learned something from every one of them. How to work, how to think, how to deal with things, and I took advantage of it. And I would like to see many more do that. But it's real hard for me to recommend law enforcement to any of these young people coming along, because I realize what they're getting into. And we used to have protection, you know, because always somebody going to complain, oh, you arrested me too hard. I got sued, I don't know, several times, and falsified. I never lost a lawsuit. I never had to pay a dime. But now then, everybody wants to sue you because there's a chance of getting money, and there's a chance of you not being able to do your job anymore, and it's stacked against them. And I hate to see it, because we need them. We need young, aggressive law enforcement people. But I'd hate to do it to them.